Hi, I'm Mike Oppenheim, and you are listening to Coffin Talk, Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our lives. With us this week is a very old friend of mine from where I grew up. His name is Mike Logsdon, and he's an incredible man. He's done so much in his short time on Earth. So far, he has not only started his own company that was a health-focused nonprofit, but he has continued to work in the field of tech consulting. But in addition to that, the main reason I wanted to get him on the show is he's also a very, very well-accomplished news and documentary photographer, and he's been in some really serious and harrowing situations, including most recently Ukraine during the actual war. So, Mike, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Mike. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm grateful for the opportunity to do this with you, and and frankly, just catch up with an old friend.
Yeah, it's incredible. And we did talk about a week ago or so to schedule all this. And and I forgot to mention to our audience that I think technically the first band I was ever in was with you for sure. I don't think we ever released an album or had songs really, but
no, but you can imagine it was amazing.
It was
for a middle school band. Yes,
exactly. Yeah, middle school bands for the win. So real quick, we always just ask our guests to give our audience their age and where they grew up.
Sure. I'm 41 years old, and I was born in San Francisco, California, but grew up in the East Bay, just outside, in a town called Orinda.
Yeah, and where do you currently live?
I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
And walk us through real quick. How'd you get to Philadelphia, and why did you stay there?
So originally, I came here for school back in 1999. I went to the University of Pennsylvania and really loved Philadelphia. It was actually kind of a little bit of a city in transition at the time. More people were leaving than coming in, but it had this really nice kind of grit, history, and culture. It was affordable. And so years later, about 10 years ago, after actually the first guy I met in college, and I started a company together, we were looking for a place to relocate it, and Philadelphia was a great option, being close to New York, being easy to get to international markets, and being affordable and having kind of a burgeoning tech scene. So
wow. And so in between the time of coming back to Philadelphia, I don't know exactly where you lived and all that, but I know that you did some pretty damn extensive bicycling. Do you want to kind of open up and talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. Back in 2005, 2006, me and my brother decided to get together and do a bicycle charity ride from Alaska down to Argentina. And we covered about 16,000 miles, but it's all downhill when you start from Alaska. So
yeah, I mean, that's a metaphor, and I'm sure it's somewhat realistic, but I'm sure there are hills between there now. And you were doing it for brain tumor research and awareness, is that correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, my brother and I, we lost our mother to a brain tumor, glioblastoma, in 1996. And one of the things that she really pushed for us was that travel was one of the great kind of educations in life, experiencing other countries, other cultures, you name it, food, art, etc. And so this seemed like a fitting way for us to honor her memory and try and do something for a specific type of brain tumor that actually at the time had a 0% survivability. And in fact, most of the time you were diagnosed, you were given, weeks or a handful of months to live.
Yeah, and I mean, my memory of all this is just my memory, but I'm going to give mine, and then I'm going to have you completely correct me and all that. But just
please do,
because I want to see if how much of a child invented this versus is this really it. My memory, because we were very good friends at the time of all this going down.
Yeah,
is your mom was on a bike ride, she fell, and then her wrist was sore, and it wasn't getting better, and then she went to a doctor, and they very quickly assessed that it was a brain tumor. And then I don't remember at all how long it was between that diagnosis and her actual death, but I started spending a lot of time at your house with my mom and like visiting her. And for me, it was like, as a child, I thought, of course she's going to survive. And like, like we all pray and care. And so it was like a really like, again, not speaking selfishly and I don't want my audience to think I'm making this all about me. It's more that I want to like interact with my friend about a subject that I never would have talked about when we were kids. So is that A, even like remotely accurate, and B, like, how was it on your end? And I know it's like a really stupid question to ask, but I'm sure you understand what I mean by that.
Well, it's a big question, but
Hey everyone, if you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us, and it's free. That's MIKEYOPP.com. Thanks.
Let me address the first part. So yeah, you did get the kind of the basic narrative right. She had fallen on her bike. She was having some pain in her arm, and it just wasn't going away. And I remember she was driving me to some sporting event, practice, and she was just saying, it's just not getting better. And she went, and they I think they went and did some physical therapy, then they did some tests, and then they did more tests, and they just couldn't figure out what was going on. And that actually went on for some time until they finally were like, well, we're kind of run out of options here. Let's do a brain scan. And that's when, they came back, unfortunately, with a diagnosis of a GBM. And so I remember actually, I was actually staying over at another one of our friends' house, Ryan, one night, and was going to spend the night there. And my dad showed up unexpectedly. And I was like, this is weird. What's going on? And he said, and it got even weirder when he was like, hey, can we sit down and talk? And, went to a different room and sat down, and he was like, look, and he basically, I can't remember exactly what he told me. I think partly because I was just so blindsided, but he said, your mother has a couple weeks to live. And, what do you, I was, I think 13, 14 at the time. And what do you do when you're, you get that news? It's kind of a bit shell shocked. And it does, like, it may sound weird, but it was not as emotional to me at the time, because it just was like information. And it just wasn't real to me. It was just like, wait, what? And, he was like, do you want to come home? And I was like, no. And so I was just totally lost in the thing. So I ended up staying with Ryan and his mom that night. And yeah, anyway, that was the start of what we thought was a kind of 2-month journey, but ended up being more along the lines about 9 months.
Okay, so because I remember it being longer, but the diagnosis was really severe. I didn't remember. Obviously, like, I heard from, I think Ryan's mom actually told me, not my mom, but I could be wrong. But anyway, I don't remember hearing ever that it was like fatal at first. And again, this is like me as your friend, so I don't know, like, but was there like, so what? Was it like a solemn feeling in your house between you and your brother and your dad? Or was it like, did you try to like be cheery? Like, do you remember like thinking maybe she'll beat this? Was there any of that?
I mean, yeah, I think there was, like, you gotta kind of have hope, right? And like, they tried some, conventional treatments, and then they tried some, there was some promising research out of Stanford that, said that maybe this type, and forgive me, I can't remember what it was, but this new treatment could do it, could save her life. And we were, my dad was like, we're going to do anything. Like, what do you do in that situation? What blows me away as as an adult is thinking about what it must have been like for my mother, and also for my father, because at that age you cannot. It's very hard for you to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, let alone, the level of responsibility, the gravity of this type of situation. And so, yeah, basically almost bankrupted our family because my dad, sold, sold whatever assets, he had, and emptied the bank accounts to try these experimental treatments after the conventional treatments, couldn't do anything.
Wow. That is, I don't get political on the show, but that's like the number one thing that makes me just get so angry is that shouldn't be bankrupting anyone. And I mean, it's just crazy.
The number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States is medical expense. Regardless of what kind of where you fall in the political spectrum, that's a fact, and it's a complicated one for families, especially in this situation, because I think one of the things that my father and mother had to talk about is how far do we take it? That's a pretty brutal thing to be thinking about the financial side in the midst of just trying to survive.
And I am only asking this because, again, this is like my job on the show. I feel weird asking it, but did your mother have any like last words specifically for you? Like, was there a like scene in your life where it's you and her?
Yeah, well, she did. Her very last words to me were, "It's cold. You should put on a jacket." I remember it was at the house, and another one of our friends, Max's mom, Rhonda, was there, and she was a fixture like your mom, at the house, and I was on the phone, and an ambulance pulled up, and Rhonda was like, "You need to get off the phone. Your mom's going to the hospital." And I just kind of ignored her, and then she said it again. She's like, "Your mom's dying," and I think I told her, "Shut the up," because I just couldn't. It's just like it was too much. And then we went to the hospital, and they had her there, and we sat with her for a while, and at some point my dad, it was in the wee hours of the morning, and at some point my dad told my brother and I, like, "Hey, why don't you guys go home and get some sleep?" And that's my mother had said, it's cold in here, you should really put on a jacket. And we left, and then that was that. And my dad said that he sat there with her until she died and closed her eyes. And my father's like a very, he's a very, well, he was, he's passed now, but he's a very kind of, emotionally open guy, not somebody who holds back on feelings. But I honestly, I can't say that I'd ever seen him just cry, just absolutely sob. And, that next day, just seeing him just crying and just now imagine, it's really heartbreaking because just imagining what it was like for him to be like, what am I going to do? I got two sons, and, my wife just passed away, and, we're under incredible financial strain, and how do you, I don't know how you, I don't know how, honestly, I don't know how he did it, but he did. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's crazy because like our town wasn't like super small, but everyone like, knows everyone's parents and stuff. And I mean, your dad was like a legend in our town, like as far as just gregarious and like larger than life personality. And like you'd go over to your house and it's like, everyone get ready for Big
Yeah,
Jim.
totally.
Like, and I mean,
Yeah.
He was awesome. I have so many good memories of your dad, but your mom also was like very involved with like everything, like sports, athletics, and like, and so it really, like, I think our community was like deeply affected by it. And I think you have a lot of your dad's qualities, and one of them for sure, knowing you before and after this, is that you're like a really like not happy, like I'm not talking about how you feel on the inside, but you lighten up a room. You're very like positive, and you're a really nice person, and like I don't think there's a single person like who like hates you from like our high school or anything like that. And so I'm curious, did this briefly or at any point ever affect that side of you, or did you always kind of retain that?
No, yeah. I mean, these experiences affect you in different ways. I don't think it never kind of soured me. The funny thing was I was dealing with a lot of depression, like totally irrespective of this. And so all of my anger in the world was focused inward. So it didn't turn me into an angry person or a bitter person. In fact, it almost did the opposite, because two things happened that I think were pretty powerful. Number one, being a kid who, I was, I had a lot of I was dealing with a lot of depression. I was suicidal. I thought if I had any inkling that I was going to, take my own life, well, how could I do that now? Like my mother passed. I'm like, what, like how terrible would that be? Not that it wouldn't be terrible regardless, but how terrible would that be to do that to my father and my brother? So that was one thing that was kind of interesting. But the second was, it really left me with this like intense feeling that life is not a guarantee. Like that, because my mother was healthy. She didn't smoke. She hardly drank. She was physically fit. Yeah, I mean, she really took care of her health. She was really health conscious, and it didn't save her. We just woke up one day and here was this thing, and there's nothing you could do. And so that really made it very clear to me that there is no guarantee in terms of your life. Every single day people wake up, they put on their pants and they walk outside, and they don't realize that that's their last day. And so it made me think, I need to be a lot more afraid of not living than I am of dying, because I don't know how much time I get. And so I want to make sure that whatever time I do have, I want to make it count. That was one of the big kind of takeaways.
And I'm sure that fueled your incredible career in photography, which I want to transition to after one more question about this. And again, thank you for being so candid and talking about this, and not over the internet punching me in the face for asking investigative questions about someone we both care about.
No, honestly, I'm it's something that I think is good to talk about, and I love the premise of the podcast you created, because I think there is a lot of, there's a little bit of a taboo and oftentimes just fear, about talking about death. And I love this forum that you've created to be able to talk about these things.
Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate that. And that is kind of like the $1 million question that we ask every single guest, no matter what, which is, what do you think happens when you die?
Well, okay. So, yeah. So I'm a Christian. So, I believe, in the Bible's teachings in terms of an afterlife. But I will say this. I think that I'm trying to live my life in such a way that even if it turns out I'm wrong, and there is no afterlife, or the afterlife is different than I expected, or that I have no regrets about it. And I think my faith helps inform how I walk through life, and it gives a view of what comes after. But honestly, again, if it turns out that it's a philosophy and not truth, then I still feel great about how I'm living my life.
Oh, it totally does, and it's a great answer. We're very similar, and also I didn't mention this at the time, but yeah, like I'm kind of shocked to know that we were both like deeply depressed in our like 15-16 year period of our lives, because no one tells each other that. Like I was very private about that. I wasn't going to say anything, and I had classes with you. I saw you all the time. I never would have guessed that was going on. It's just crazy. And what's further more interesting to me is that I have the same kind of philosophy, which is like, you better hedge your bets. Like, no matter what religion, philosophy it is, be proud of what you're doing here for sure. So yeah, I love that answer. Okay, so I want to switch now to the other topic that we briefly discussed in the introduction, which is you have been to some incredible places at incredible times. And so I'm going to start just with recently in Ukraine, because everyone listening knows exactly what the hell's going on there. But I believe you've also been into the Middle East and covered that area too. So holy crap, man. First of all, just as a person who's actually been there, unlike the millions and millions of us in the United States who talk all day online about this war that we're not even in, what do you think is going on there? Like, not politically, but like, what do you think is going on? Like, is this a war that Ukraine can win? What's it like?
To say what will happen, or what is happening beyond what I can directly, what I have directly observed, is definitely above my pay grade. There's a lot of you have an unending number of experts, pundits weighing in on this, and predicting the future just in general is a dangerous is a dangerous endeavor, but especially with something like this. What I can tell you is two things just off the bat. One is I think it's way worse than people can understand from a distance. One of the things that's complicated as a photographer is showing what is happening, especially when it involves so much death, and doing it in a way that, like if when you're photographing, for example, some of the atrocities, you're talking about hundreds of bodies, strewn out over a village, men, women, children. It is incredibly graphic. It is really a challenge to be able to make meaningful images from that people can see, the average person can see and absorb and gain some understanding from. Because if you just, if I just, and I've got plenty of these photos, but of people, who are missing limbs, missing part of their skull. They've been shot in the face. They've been hit by an artillery shell. They're completely mangled. You can't just show people that very easily. At least most people can't, and you certainly can't do it in the kind of the mainstream kind of outlets, the media outlets, because they just won't run it. So I think a lot of what we see is sanitized, even when we recognize how brutal this war is because of that. The second thing I would say is that I was blown away by the resilience and the kind of coming together of the Ukrainian people in this. I mean, here is a country in relative terms that is not so large, and especially when we're talking about military might in comparison to Russia, which most people would consider one of the most advanced militaries in the world, and certainly one of the most powerful. And for them to not just slow them down, but actually stop them and push them back is something really, really exceptional. And it's not simply about the arms that they had or Western arms that have been shipped in. It has a lot to do with what I saw while in Kyiv, while in Lviv, while in Zaporizhia and other places. It's people coming together, whether they're making tank obstacles, whether they're retrofitting civilian drones for reconnaissance, or to include the ability to drop explosives, whether it's auto mechanics working on seized Russian military equipment and repurposing it for the Ukrainian military. I mean, the list goes on and on. And we saw people, who came out of the subways of Kyiv, and they said, "Look, I can sit down here and be safe, maybe, but maybe still die, or I can get up, and go out into the city, and I can feed all the elderly who can't leave." And it was powerful to see.
That's incredible. Amidst the many great points you just made, I was curious because I've always had a strong feeling about this. We tend not to show death in our media, period, like end of story. And so we won't show our own soldiers in wars we fight and stuff like that. How do you stand as someone who has actually seen it in person and then also taken photographs of it? Do you think it would behoove the American public or any public to see death up close in its real form?
The short answer, I believe, is yes. I think that it is important that we see what war really is, or what human suffering is. It doesn't even have to be war. I mean, we're talking about, we could be talking about famine. We could be talking about a lot of different things, but at least in the context of Ukraine, we're talking about the violence of war. And the cost of that, and I think it is important. And for me, I think certainly one thing to see soldiers killed, and it's something that as a photographer going into a war zone, you mentally accept that that's going to happen. And certainly seeing civilian casualties, you expect that. But I think one thing that I think is that people should see, and they should probably see in all of its graphic nature, was the wholesale slaughter of civilians, men, women, and children, in places like Bucha and Irpin.
Wow. I can't even imagine. I've seen, like I told you off air, I did a lot of hospice work, and I've seen that kind of death, and I've seen like the dying process of many, many, many times, but I have not seen like violence related. And then I have a friend who was already on the show who was a police officer, and he's told me some stories from his calls that like blow my mind. And I feel like these things don't define the person who sees them, but I do feel like all of you who see it have something in common, which is you seem to be like calmer about it all in a way that's not spooky. It's just more like interesting to me that your reality is quite different from the imagination of reality that I have and other people. We already talked about what you think would happen when you die, and you have good faith and all that, but like, how many times in your life, including Ukraine recently, have you been scared out of your mind that you were going to like die on one of these trips of yours?
Yeah, good question. It's weird. I'm not saying this to paint myself in a certain light, but I was not, there are so many photographers and obviously so many, service members of the Ukrainian military and international volunteers, who are in the thick of it. And I'm talking about like frontline kind of really, really brutal stuff. I was not, in that situation. I was in kind of artillery bombardments in Kyiv going, we were me and about probably 6 others were the first ones into Bucha after the Russians had been pushed out. But basically, for me, when the artillery was coming down in Kyiv, for example, when you first get there, you think, okay, like I'm going to sleep with my boots on, so that if we get hit, at least I'm not going to be walking on shattered glass with bare feet. Maybe I can get myself out. Maybe I can help get our friends out. But you would be shocked how quickly so much of this, whether it's artillery or even seeing the death involved in war, can become normalized to a degree. So at first, we're kind of like trying to figure out our emergency exit plans. What can we do? What are we near? And then a week or two later, you've got artillery and missiles coming in, and the building is shaking, and car alarms are going on, and you're drinking a cup of coffee and smoking a cigarette and just saying, well, that was close. And then, but I think that when it comes to the death, in terms of like seeing bodies, it's an interesting thing, because when at least for me, I kept repeating to myself, it's only flesh, it's only meat. Like these aren't people anymore. And that may sound really cold and callous, and probably it is, but it was the way that, at least for me, to make sure that I could continue to do the work that I was there to do without getting caught up too much in the emotion of the situation, which really came in later after I left. And I had this really, if I can expand on this a little bit more, I had this really hard time, I think, in trying to reconcile what I saw. And I was trying to, this one particular place in Bucha, I saw what appeared to be a man, a woman, and 3 children. Their corpses were set on fire. They had some signs of torture. One individual had a Ukrainian had said, I'm not so expert to be able to make that determination, but it really got to me because there were these kids, and I thought, and I kept thinking to myself, what was the circumstance in which they, presumably the Russian military, had decided to kill what looked like an entire family? Did they do it all at once? Did they do it one by one? Were they trying to get information? Was the woman raped? What was the, and I kept going back and forth in my mind about how this came to be. And I think what my mind was doing was trying to find some sort of, even just barely rational, some sort of rationale, even if it was totally irrational and totally, and absolutely a war crime, I was just trying to understand how that could happen. And what I finally realized was that was a kind of an exercise in futility, and that, you can't always, find the rational in, kind of irrationality. And, and so I, had to kind of let it go. And that was the best thing for my mental health.
Yeah. Wow. We have covered a lot of bases on this podcast. I'm kind of shocked, actually, that we covered as much as we did. I have to do a lot of thinking. There's so much thinking to do about words you've said that have painted pictures and ideas for me. But I do want to thank you for all that. And before I let you go, I always give my guests an opportunity to just kind of like give their message to the world. So like, what do you feel like telling people? And it doesn't have to be related to anything we talked about, just whatever you want.
Yeah, it's a great question. Maybe if you let me, I'll repeat one thing that I said earlier that I think is important, and I'll say one other. So I'll start with the latter. So my father, was fond of saying, if your life's a book, make it worth reading. And that's something that's really stuck with me. You get this one life, and he's like, please, make it a page turner. Don't make it, don't make it the book that you open it up and you read a couple pages and you're like, you just set it down. And then the last thing, which I said earlier, is be far more afraid of not living than you are of dying.
That's just so cool. And it's funny because I know where it takes me, which is my own life drama and things that have happened in my life. And like the closest I ever came to quitting was doing that exactly, which is just making my life so damn safe from a psychological perspective that no one and nothing could ever hurt me again. And it's like crazy that like I knew even then at the pit of my despair that was the worst decision one could ever make, and that life is not worth living if you're not living. And it's why I'm still very active when like it comes to, pursuing people's right to free speech and freedom of expression, which goes back to photography that we talked about. Like I do believe that like it would be better for the American public to hear things that are unpleasant and to hear things that aren't true or false but are just out there than to like not let people give their impressions. And so you've helped me with so much of that stuff. Thank you for doing everything you do, because I wanted to ask you to come on the show way before you went to Ukraine, actually. And like it's weird to be like friends with someone and then to like not ever talk to them for like 20 something years, because it's just how life goes. But to like root for you from afar and like to see your trip with your brother, and it sounds to me like you're doing the best damn job ever with all that. So thank you again for coming on the show. Once again, the best way to support the podcast is just simply to subscribe, maybe share it with a friend, and then please head over to MikeYopp.com, MikeYopp, and sign up for free to the newsletter that comes out once a week and help support us. And again, thank you, Mike, and to all of the audience listening, thank you so much. We wouldn't be here without you. Once again, this has been an episode of Coffin Talk. My name is Mike Oppenheim, and we will see you soon.